Hey everyone, someone commented on another wrestling game video that I put together asking me where the No Mercy upload was, and I honestly thought I'd already covered the game before. I've looked at the WCW N64 games briefly and even the excellent WCW Feel the Bang mod, but I'm yet to cover No Mercy on the Wrestling Bios channel, so that's the plan today. WWF No Mercy, the final Aki wrestling game on N64, is the end of a journey really. The last ride for probably the best series of wrestling games to ever get released on home consoles. From WCW World Tour right up to No Mercy, N64 owners had all the bragging rights. The Aki games were simply the best way to experience professional wrestling through video games, and No Mercy took everything that was learned prior and packaged it all together, delivering what many still consider today as the very best wrestling game that's ever been released. By the time No Mercy hit the shelves, I'd gotten myself an N64, but I was also at the age where I wasn't into wrestling as much as I used to be. Everyone goes through it, you still watch the big shows and you follow along with what's going on, but it isn't your main priority. Other things are way more important, and you find better ways of spending your free time. It isn't just wrestling fans who go through that either, it happens with all sorts of fandoms. But that being said, when I got my copy of No Mercy, my free time was completely taken up once again by this wonderful thing we call professional wrestling, and I was hooked. I loved the WCW Aki games. The Japanese virtual pro wrestling games are something I would have loved too, but I don't know enough about those games to confidently talk about them, and I'm also not going to try and pretend I know everything about those games without actually taking the time to sit and play them, and I mean actually properly play them. But WCW vs NWO World Tour and WCW Revenge were my favourite wrestling games growing up, and seeing the progression made by the time No Mercy came around was just incredible. I also know that WrestleMania 2000 came out before No Mercy, but gonna be honest, I skipped that game completely. I didn't own the N64 when WrestleMania 2000 came out, and none of my buddies picked it up either, so that's a game I only dabbled in through emulation, but one day I am gonna play it properly. The way I saw it back then, there was no real point playing Mania 2000 if I had No Mercy, but I've been reading quite a bit too that WrestleMania 2000 shouldn't be slept on, and so I plan on giving it a proper playthrough very soon. Also, I know Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 is considered the pinnacle for many gamers. I understand it's a fucking sin not to mention VPW2 in an Aki video, but again, I'm not going to pretend I know the game inside out when I haven't played it enough to give my honest thoughts. But I do plan on spending a lot of time with Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 because I don't want to half-ass it when I make that video. Anyway, here we are once again. I've been playing No Mercy quite a bit to prepare for this video, and it still holds up incredibly well today. Let's get started as we take a look at Aki's final wrestling game on N64. Let's take a brief look at the Aki N64 games released in the States and in Europe before No Mercy. I think it's important to see how things progressed and how things improved with every game. When we go back and play WCW vs NWO World Tour nowadays, it doesn't look like much. Models look a little blocky, faces are flat and some are unrecognizable. Textures overall look very simple, it's all a little basic. However, back then, when you first put that cartridge into your N64 and you witnessed the greatness of World Tour's opening video, it was one of the best things in the world. What you have to remember is that WCW fans hadn't gotten a video game since Super Brawl on the Super Nintendo, so seeing this kind of thing was a dream come true for many followers of WCW. Aki had brought WCW vs the World to PlayStation consoles. Ukes had also released Power Move Pro Wrestling to PlayStations in the States and Europe, but WCW World Tour revolutionized professional wrestling games forever with its simple yet extremely addictive gameplay engine. World Tour was intuitive, anyone could pick it up and play a few matches, it was a whole lot of fun, and simply, it was a better experience than the games that came before it. The following year, WCW Revenge hit the shelves and it took everything that made World Tour great and made it even better. Revenge made World Tour feel like a demo. Revenge also felt like a much more authentic WCW experience with its bigger roster, championship belts, and its selection of pay-per-view arenas. The gameplay itself was updated with animations feeling a bit more smooth and characters being given more moves that reflected their real-life counterparts. It could sometimes feel like characters played the same in World Tour, whereas in Revenge you could see a bit more care was taken, with much more accurate signature moves, finishing moves and taunts. Matches just flowed better, and while the fundamentals of World Tour were held over, the additional moves and animations made Revenge a much more complete wrestling experience. I can't say enough good things about WCW NWO Revenge. It's a game I have a ton of nostalgia for, and I could probably say I had more fun with Revenge when compared to No Mercy, but that's strictly a personal thing too, because my fandom was at an all-time high when Revenge came out. While Acclaim was working on WWF Attitude, they were hit with some pretty bad news. Their partnership with the World Wrestling Federation was over, and the WWF would be partnering up with THQ and Aki, the guys who brought wrestling brilliance to the N64. It's been said that WCW did not want to share developer with the WWF, and it was WCW's decision to end their relationship with THQ and Aki, but more information became public since the release of Guy Evans' Nitro book. According to THQ's senior vice president of licensing and merchandising at the time, there was a dispute regarding royalties, and WCW were given $10 million with a $5 million down payment to move development duties to Electronic Arts. THQ still planned on releasing WCW games that were already in development. WCW NWO Live on PlayStation, a localized version of New Japan Pro Wrestling Token Retsuden 3 by Yuke's, was scheduled for a release, but it never saw the light of day. Instead, THQ released WCW Thunder on PS1 by Inland Productions. This served as the final WCW game released by the publisher. They also released WCW Nitro on N64 in the same month, a game that had released a year prior on PlayStation consoles. Kinda makes you think they'd been sitting on Nitro for N64 for months and they didn't really have any desire to release it initially. That same year though, Aki and THQ released WWF WrestleMania 2000 on N64, a game that shared its engine almost exactly with Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, and fans of the WCW N64 games could now have those same matches, only this time it would be with a WWF roster. Along with the expected upgrades to graphics, animations and moves, a story mode was presented for the first time in an English Aki wrestling game. The story mode was pretty linear, but still, it would have been something that I would have loved back in the day. Once you won all the belts in Revenge, you were left with trying to get high scores in matches, which by the way was a lot of fun, especially in multiplayer, but anything that adds to the single player experience would have been very, very welcome. WrestleMania 2000 did have graphical updates, but, and I'm just calling it as I see it here, the upgrades weren't overly impressive. The game looked great for its time, no doubt, but compared to Revenge, I'd say they look pretty similar. No Mercy, on the other hand, looked graphically superior in every way possible. Boot up No Mercy and you get a great intro video showcasing the wrestlers involved in the game. Once you get into the main menu, you'll hear a song that'll stick in your head forever, though you gotta click into Exhibition to hear it in all its glory. Diggity dog. We're going to come back out here soon and look at the modes and options available, but first let's look at gameplay. Now, something that was removed from No Mercy were full entrances. In WrestleMania 2000 you could watch your wrestlers step inside the ropes, but in No Mercy we only see characters on the rampway. For me, this really isn't a big deal. The lack of CD quality audio already made entrances feel a little rough anyway, so I don't think cutting entrances short was a big loss. Immediately though, you can see the difference in terms of graphics. Wrestlers don't look nearly as blocky as before, with much more polygons getting spared for our favourite grapplers. The face textures are still a little weird, but you can't really knock these games for textures and whatnot. It's just the way things were, and besides, the character faces have a certain charm to them, even going back to the WCW games. Arenas look bigger. In the previous games, it could sometimes feel like you were wrestling in front of a very small audience and it felt a little claustrophobic, but No Mercy Mercy completely fixes that issue with more fans on the ground floor and larger arenas for the ring to sit in. No Mercy has a complete graphical overhaul with everything simply looking better. Everything is proportioned correctly this time around, from the arena to the ring right down to the superstars themselves. Small touches are included everywhere that we take for granted nowadays, such as proper turnbuckle pads. Gameplay is what you'd expect. It takes what made the previous games good and added small improvements such as running grapples and a new weapon system. There's a wider variety of moves and taunts available. It feels smoother to play with animations getting tweaked or completely overhauled. And once again, it's easy for newcomers and a few advanced techniques are added for veterans. A complaint I've seen online is that the AI can be a little cheap in No Mercy sometimes, and it feels like moves get countered a bit too often. I agree, moves do seem to get reversed more frequently, but it doesn't take anything away from the game. All in all, when you start your journey off at WCW vs NWO World Tour and you reach WWF No Mercy, you'll feel like you're playing an absolute complete product. You're seeing how the developers matured along with the console, and you can see the developers reach their peak. It honestly feels like there's nothing more that could have been added in terms of gameplay, with the engine being perfected in No Mercy. There's no stepping backwards, everything about No Mercy just looks and plays better. Now, I said earlier I prefer WCW Revenge, and that's still very true, but that's mainly because of the roster and how it captures that particular era of WCW so well. I've just got a soft spot for it, but I'll still admit that No Mercy looks and plays much better, and that's without looking at the serious amount of extra modes and match types available. If Revenge looked and played exactly like No Mercy and it contained all the extra options and modes, it would have been my personal absolute perfect game. Okay, so I already had this video completed and ready for upload, but I thought I'd add this bit right here because a ton of people talked about this one specific problem with No Mercy once I announced this video on social media. The initial copies of No Mercy had a save bug, and this affected both NTSC and PAL versions of the game. What's more, it looked like it affected a whole lot of people, and some didn't go back to the game when the game glitched out. Basically, the bug would wipe out your game save, and it could happen at any time, and No Mercy had to go through a recall, not too dissimilar to WrestleMania 21 on Xbox that we talked about earlier in the week. THQ issued new copies of the game for those who returned their buggy cartridges, and you can tell if you've got a new copy by looking at the product code on the cartridge. You'll see a number 1 beside USA or EU. Many people I spoke to had bad copies of the game, and it's only fair to bring this up too, seeing as WrestleMania 21 got annihilated in my other video for glitches and bugs. My old copy of No Mercy didn't have the save glitch, and I didn't even know there was a glitch until years later. Blissful ignorance, but I'm sure a lot of people were frustrated who bought the game on day one. It looks like the glitch-free cartridge in the States is pretty hard to come by nowadays, and copies on eBay are ridiculously expensive, though PAL copies are much more reasonably priced. But there's a caveat to owning the updated PAL version. The blood was removed. It's been reported that blood was removed so copies could get sold in Germany. A few other N64 games were rejected due to showing blood, and so THQ and Aki were just preempting any chance of the same happening with No Mercy. My advice, if you really want to play on a console and you're not a hardcore collector, just buy an EverDrive cartridge and save the money. Either that or keep checking eBay and hope someone sells a USA 1 variant without knowing what they have. With all that being said, let's get back to looking at why No Mercy was so awesome. Trying to pinpoint what made No Mercy so good from a gameplay perspective is quite tough without breaking everything down to its very core, right down to what each button does. I'm not going to do that in this video because while I could tell you about how great the simplified controls are, how easy it is to hold buttons for strong strikes and grapples and all that, there's just no way you can put into words how addictive No Mercy is without playing it yourself. Even though the button layout is simple and easy to understand, somehow it feels rewarding when pulling off moves, and I think a lot of that has to do with how good the moves look. Again, it's hard to explain, but the moves feel like they have weight and a lot of impact, something that seems hard for developers to properly implement even today. Simple grapples look great in No Mercy, the satisfaction you get when timing a hard strike too is awesome, and landing a finisher after working hard to fill up the spirit meter is very gratifying too. Matches feel like epic encounters and there's so much variety in the movesets that you'll never get bored, even when playing through a championship or story mode. There's nothing worse when starting a career or story mode in a wrestling game and you get bored with your character halfway through. You begin rushing through things to reach the end, and you even end up diverting yourself away from season mode in order to play exhibitions just to change things up. Not once did I feel that way with No Mercy. Still, if you wanted to choose other superstars, you had a great selection available. So let's check out the full unlocked roster before checking out the match types and modes available, areas where No Mercy truly shines. If we count every single character, including the character skins that are found in No Mercy, we have got a whopping 74 characters to choose from. You've got The Rock, Steve Austin, Mankind, The Undertaker, Triple H, Kane, The Hardy Boys, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, X-Pac, Taz, The Outlaws, The McMahons. It's probably the very best Attitude roster ever featured in a WWF game. Each character slot also has 4 attires, all of which can be edited, and some hidden wrestlers are actually skins of wrestlers already included in the game. The top of the card is represented here right down to the bottom. There's plenty to like about the roster, and at the time the game was released there wouldn't have been any complaints. Each wrestler also has their own stats. There's a much bigger emphasis here on wrestlers playing and feeling different from one another, and we'll look into this a bit more when we explore the creation modes. But these aren't a bunch of character models who just have a few different moves. Learning what your wrestler's good at and learning where their strengths are will help you understand the best way to play with that particular superstar. Alright, let's see the match types we have. We've got a standard exhibition, Royal Rumble matches, a pay-per-view mode, a King of the Ring mode, special guest referee matches, ladder matches, and Iron Man matches. Pay-per-view mode lets you set up your own pay-per-view events, pretty straightforward. King of the Ring mode lets you set up different tournament types, including ladder and cage matches. Cage matches are only available as one-on-one singles, by the way. There are no multi-man cage matches. And you can set these up by going into exhibition and then selecting cage match. There's one thing missing here though, and that's the Hell in a Cell match. There was a lot of talk about cell matches possibly making it into No Mercy, but I'm unsure if that was just fan speculation. Regardless, there's no cell matches available in No Mercy, and that's a shame. Ladder matches are alright, nothing special. It's a little comical how wrestlers take bumps when on the ladder, but generally speaking, the ladder matches play out just fine. It's all about button mashing when you get to the top of the ladder. The faster you tap buttons, the better chance you have of grabbing the briefcase. The same rings true for cage matches. You can use the cage to hurt your opponent, but when trying to climb out, it's all about tapping buttons as quickly as possible. Your spirit meter also depletes as you try to leave the cage, so you gotta be careful and leave the cage when you're ready to. Iron Man matches don't need an explanation, neither do guest referee matches. But I do wish special guest referee matches would return in WWE 2K games. Being the special guest referee in a heated online game between two legit good players would be a lot of fun. Just like HBK at SummerSlam 1997, I'd call it right down the middle. You've also got your usual triple threat tag team and handicap matches available. The Royal Rumble mode allows 4 players in the ring at the same time, and really that's it for the match types. It doesn't sound like much now, but back then this was pretty varied, and playing new match types with the Aki engine was both intriguing and a lot of fun. But I will admit that these games really shined in simple, no-nonsense 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 matchups, especially in multiplayer. The fundamentals were absolutely mastered here, so no gimmicks were necessary, although they are a welcome bonus. Oh, before I forget, this is pretty important too. You can fight backstage in No Mercy. This is the first time a WWF game let you fight backstage. Championship mode then, what an absolute treat this was. What we have here is something special. The replay value is completely off the charts. Choose a championship belt you'd like to compete for, choose an eligible superstar, and then begin your road to the belt. No Mercy uses a branching story system, and you'll also get a storyline map as you progress. You don't need to win every match. As a matter of fact, you're going to need to lose quite a few matches if you want to 100% this thing. And you'll also be given specific tasks every now and then during matches that can also alter the path your superstar takes to get the championship belt. There's a lot to do here. Remember, you have 7 belts to choose from, and each belt has its own storyline map or storyline tree. There's even a storyline for defending the championship if you go back and select the same superstar as before. So there's lots to do here, and at the time, this was the absolute best single player experience available in any wrestling game to date. There's multiple ways for you to win that championship belt, and while the dialogue and little cutscenes may not look like much today, back then this was the absolute pinnacle. Some championship belts have much more complex storyline maps, and you can save some money by unlocking superstars in championship mode that are also available for purchase inside the shop. If you decide to go back to No Mercy today, I'd recommend checking out the storyline FAQs available online that'll guide you to the unlockable characters. But if you want the real experience, just play it blind and see what happens when you win or lose matches. You never know which hidden superstar may show up at the end of your journey. There's also a single player survival mode available. This is a gauntlet mode where you'll go up against 99 characters. Rules are similar to the Royal Rumble where it's every man for themselves, though eliminations can also happen via pinfall, submission, and TKO. Hidden wrestlers can also be unlocked in survival mode, however you have to be the one who eliminates the hidden character. If the CPU does it, then you won't get that superstar unlocked. You can see there's quite a few ways to unlock the hidden wrestlers in the game. You can do it via championship mode, survival mode, or spending in-game currency. Alright, let's take a trip to the Smackdown mall and see what's going on there. In the shop, you can purchase new Create a Wrestler parts, including classic attires for wrestlers currently in the game. Remember, each superstar has 4 attire slots, so you can create new versions of superstars included in the game pretty easily. There's also a ton of moves available for purchase, with quite a few of these being finishers you'd find in the WCW games. You can find a lot of revenge and virtual pro wrestling holdovers in the creation mode, making it pretty easy to create superstars you found in the old Aki games. You can also buy superstars here if you can't be asked unlocking them through championship and survival mode, but be warned, some of the prices are absolutely ridiculous. There's a few arenas available here too, and some weapons and props. Plenty of unlockables here, and unlike other wrestling games I've played recently, it's all mostly stuff you'd actually want to own, stuff that actually expands the game a little. The real magic can be found in Superstar data though. Let's take a look at the Superstar edit mode. And check this out, practically everything about a superstar's appearance can be changed. From their name to their clothing, practically everything about how a wrestler looks can be modified. No other wrestling game offered this amount of customization before, and you could spend hours just in this mode messing around with a wrestler's attire and updating their gear. This was awesome back in the day, and it still is now. We can't edit a superstar's moves, fighting styles, or allies and enemies, but it's worth taking a look here to see where a superstar's strengths and weaknesses are. Jericho here has good speed, expert submission skills, he has a normal reaction to blood, a normal jumping distance with a good aerial offense rating of 4. His weakest body part is his head, with all other parts being fairly average. All this information lets us know how a superstar plays, and it also lets us know how we should attack the player to do the most damage. So for Jericho, focus on the head and keep him away from aerial attacks. We can also see his main rivals and who, if anyone, would accompany him to the ring. This is for interference mainly, and to be honest, I usually turn interference off. But you can see there's quite a lot going on here, and for an N64 game, it's pretty impressive. I believe there's a lot of similar things going on in Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 on N64, but again, I don't know enough about that game to comment. If you want to edit Jericho's moves, the best thing you can do is clone him, but this clone version of Jericho won't be featured in Championship mode. Still, it's a good alternative if you want to switch up a superstar's moves and relationships. Create a Wrestler lets you make your own superstar with the parts available in-game or parts you've bought in the store. Loads of moves are available too, and you should have no problem making somewhat recognizable superstars who aren't in the game. I suck at these modes though, always have, and I always mention it when I upload a video that has a create a wrestler mode. The stable editor allows you to change the categories in the player select screen, letting you separate wrestlers into their own groups like the way WCW Revenge had the NWO, the Wolfpack and the Flock. The sheer amount of customizations available in No Mercy make it an instant winner for those who like to edit their game. And you gotta remember too that fans weren't used to getting this amount of customization options inside a video game. It's nothing short of brilliant. I knew before putting this video together that I wouldn't be able to do No Mercy justice, and now that I think about it, that's probably the reason why I've put this off for so long. You can watch videos all day about No Mercy and you can watch the best of the best playing through the entire game, but nothing compares to actually playing it and experiencing it for yourself. This is a game, in order to appreciate it, you can't watch, you have to play it. As mentioned earlier, No Mercy is the end of the Aki journey on N64. It started off good with WCW World Tour, and it ended perfectly with No Mercy. The developer's experience is on full display here, and it's not just through the gameplay, but the options given to the player too, the presentation, how it all looks. It's such a complete game. Aki would go on to create the awesome Def Jam games, and they also put out Ultimate Muscle on the GameCube, but they ended their N64 run on the highest note possible by leaving fans with what's still considered today as the greatest wrestling game ever made. For many of us too, it was the final game we got into on the N64 console. No Mercy was the last game on the system that I spent a lot of time with, and capturing this footage really made me miss that console. This was all captured on an emulator, of course, so I ended up banging N64 with World Tour, Revenge and No Mercy, and at the time of scripting this video, I'm waiting for it to arrive in the post. I just need to get myself a good old CRT TV and I'll be all good. That's the effect No Mercy had on me just by revisiting it today, and it shows how much nostalgia I have for the game. So even if I didn't do the game justice today in this video, at least I ended up with the console in the game again. If you've never played No Mercy, even if you've watched countless videos on the game, do yourself a favour and give it a shot. I guarantee you won't regret it. Thanks for watching this one, and take care.
Diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity dog.